Finance Committee, please be seated.
Mr. Chairman?
Sorry, Mr. Eden.
Yeah, just one brief correction. I spoke to the chief officer. He will make it in regards to the Savannah canteen.
Mr.
Sorry.
Chairman, and one point of clarification and one correction. The canteen at Savannah Primary School is run by the Savannah PTA.
I thought so.
Not by a vendor.
I always knew that. I didn't want to contradict you unnecessarily.
No problem.
Thank you.
I can take the correction. On the food, Mr. Chairman, want to make very careful in terms of things like hot dogs and pizza and those things. What is happening is, for example, things like turkey dogs, pizza's done with whole wheat flour and whole grains. So in other words, even the food that is traditionally seen to be fattier food is prepared in line with the standard in a healthy way.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any questions on EGA 2, job placement and employer support activities for $1,533,281? Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we continue to hear that this agency is not an employment agency. However, all the description of what it does says the complete opposite to me. Can somebody explain why we are saying this is not an employment agency when in fact they are deploying, sending people to job placement, for job placement?
Mr. Chair, through you, just for clarification, when it is said that the NWDA is not an employment agency in the sense it is not a recruitment agency or an agency that is contracted by employers, that is what the agency is not. It is not hired by employers to find employees. So that's what is the misconception in many people's minds. So that's what we were trying to clarify. Now, with respect to services, obviously the services provided by the NWDA is to try to assist people in achieving employment as the ultimate goal. But a big part of that service delivery is to do with training, development, identifying what are the issues with respect to gaining and succeeding in employment. So that is a clarification, not that it doesn't offer services as it relates to employment. It is not a classic recruitment agency hired by employers per se. That's the difference, because some people still have a confusion, and that was the only clarification that was meant to be given.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, 2 years ago, we were presented with a printout of a register of all the people registered. And I believe whilst here, we counted 4 to 50 that was duplication. The person said that he could paint and he could also do carpenter work. So he would represent it twice on there and the likes and the likes. Have we straightened this out now and it's 1 for 1?
Mr. Chair, yes, that issue as it relates to people being counted multiple times, I'm being told, has been resolved. But just so the member understands through you, people can still be coded as separate codes given whatever their experience are or their qualifications. So you can still have Joe Brown, who is a painter and a plasterer, if just using those two hypothetical codes. But Joe Brown shouldn't be considered multiple times when you actually go to determine the number of people registered.
Well, that is what would be expected. You look under it and see what he can do. He might be a rocket scientist, but he can also paint. Mr. Chairman, I need to know how we determine who we're sending out to the jobs. Because here's what I'm hearing. Let's take somebody wants someone to sell jewelry. Enough jewelry stores in town. That's a good example. And they are sent people who have been working in supermarkets such as cashiers. That's the kind of complaint that I'm hearing. How do we determine the fit for that job?
Mr. Chair, through you, the process has really been re-engineered since we took office, and one of the abilities that exists currently that didn't exist previously was there is an ability for people to register as self-registered, meaning they don't actually have to go through the process of working with an officer from the NWDA, and that was to facilitate those people that wanted to just refer themselves to jobs without necessarily going through an employment services officers. There's also the ability for people to register as needing the assistance of the NWDA, and those are the people that have either the more severe needs as it relates to helping them getting back into the employment world. So it's only those persons who would be considered job seeker extended registrants that actually are referred, if at all, by the NWDA directly. Previously, all of it had to go through the NWDA in terms of the officer making the referral. Now there's two referral streams, a self-referral stream and referred by the NWDA. The self-referral stream is available to persons who feel that they don't need the hand-holding, so to speak, and that they just want to know what jobs are available and how to apply for them. The Caymanians are able to register in either of those categories depending on whatever need they want, and they can move between categories as they see fit. And Mr. Chair, just for completeness about how people are referred, when the NWDA staff refers somebody to a job, and as I said, that only refers to those extended clients, they have to put why, currently now, as a result of the changes that have gone on, they have to put why they feel this person is an appropriate referral, and that information is visible as a result of the link that has been created with the immigration database. That information is visible to the immigration administrators and the immigration boards when it comes to making any determinations.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I understand why, but there are so many instances of people saying to me that the NWDA sent people that were not suitable. And then, as a result, of course, they're going to get their work permit application turned down if they don't hire one of those people or defer it. Mind you, I would prefer see one of them in place, but it is a fact that the immigration department seems to be dependent exclusively on that referral and expect that there will be a placement. And if there is no placement, they are suspicious of the individual who did those interviews. That is precisely why I've said that these things interviews need to be set up with somebody from NWDA to be in those interviews. If we're going to, quote unquote, hold their hands, then let's hold their hands.
Mr. Chair, through you, the practicality of that, given the resources of the NWDA, is not possible. The NWDA, I'm told, gets 300 jobs posted with them per month and on average. And so to be able to have somebody who is basically there with an interview would require an astronomical number of resources compared to what we have now. But what we do, what the NWDA does offer is for those persons that want the additional support of the NWDA officers to prepare for those interviews, that is available. But similarly, there are a number of people we found as a result of looking at strengthening the agency that didn't want that. They felt that they were sufficiently independent to access that job-seeking process. They just wanted to know what jobs were available. So we made that self-referral, and it's very clear now as to who is being referred of their own as opposed to who is being referred by the NWDA. And because we've included a requirement which didn't exist before, the NWDA officer now has to state why they feel this person is appropriate. It puts much more accountability on who is referred from the agency. Similarly, the employers themselves, there is an opportunity for them to state why the person wasn't suitable in the employer's mind if they decided not to hire that person. Again, it's about to facilitate transparency of information for the Immigration Board to make their final determination.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you.
I wonder if the minister can tell us then, when that employer write the reasons why the person wasn't suitable to the NWDA, does that go on to the Immigration Department?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that information is captured in the database itself, which is accessible to the Immigration Department because of the link that's there. It's an automatic information transfer. All they have to do on their end is to log on, and the information is also readily available to the job applicant themselves.
So why is the Immigration Department turned down work permits then on the basis that someone had been referred from the NWDA? Is that link working properly?
Mr. Chair, I'm being advised by my staff that the Immigration Department and the boards are using this information. They meet with members of the ministry on a regular basis, last time being in the last 2 months, and that the information is there to hand for them to use to make their determinations.
Well, somehow it's getting lost in transition. I don't know where. But, Mr. Chairman, just let me ask. The minister just said that NWDA registers 300 people per day. Job
Adverts, so companies will register about 300 job advertisements. They will register with the system. That's what I'm being told. Not necessarily individuals, but jobs themselves.
300 per month?
On average, that's what I'm being told, yes.
But, Mr. Chairman, didn't you recently give us the statistics that we had 7.8% Caymanians unemployed?
7.9.
7.9, whatever it is. Off by 1 point, a couple though. And we're getting 300 a month? Mr. Chairman, I think 7.9 equated to somewhere less than 2,000. Right, sir?
You mean in actual Caymanians unemployed?
Yeah.
Approximately. Yeah.
Now let's hear how many people unemployed we have registered that has taken up the opportunity to register, look for a job.
Mr. Chair, through you, I'm provided with information that states that there are currently 514 unemployed Caymanian job seekers, and they both are in both of the Job Seeker Plus, which is the independent job seeker category, and the Job Seeker Extended, which is the ones that are getting services from the NWDA.
514? And we can't get, you mean to me 514? Do we realize how many times 514 can go into 3,600? Mr. Chairman, is it 600 a year jobs that are registered? What is the success rate of this NWDA?
Not necessarily, Mr. McLean. It could be the same job being advertised several months for the year.
Yeah, but it got be filled. And all these Caymanians unemployed. I need to hear what the success rate is, sir, to determine that statistically.
Again, Mr. Speaker, the between, and this is just for the month of April, because this information is, again, the NWDA and the evolution of the NWDA is a work in progress. But what we have been able to do, the NWDA, between the month of April, has indicated that 314 vacancies had been posted by 176 companies on the NWDA job portal, which were closed by the end of 30th of April 2015. And based on the responses received from the employers, the NWDA actually conducted an exercise to determine how many jobs were actually filled of these that were closed. 15 posts were still in progress of being recruited. 27 posts were filled through the NWDA system. 21 were Caymanians, 5 married to Caymanians, 1 permanent resident. There were additional 17 posts which were filled by Caymanians of the employer. They may not have actually had that particular job registered, but they filled their posts by a Caymanian who had contacted them via the online portal. So that's an additional 17. And then there were 48 posts were filled by Caymanians. Yes, Mr. Chair, just wanted clarification. So it's been confirmed to me that in the month of April, 48 posts were filled by Caymanians as reported to the NWDA. Again, 21 posts were filled by job seekers applying through the NWDA online portal. 17, as I said, were posts filled by Caymanian job seekers applying through the NWDA online portal for another post that was posted by the same company. And 10 posts advertised with the NWDA were filled by job seekers that didn't actually apply through the NWDA online portal, but those posts were available online at the NWDA as well. So 48 in total for the month of April.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would do that speed writing.
So you have approximately 15, 16% success rate on a monthly basis.
Mr. Chair.
48 compared to 300.
Based on, and again, bear in mind, any of the clients or the registrants that the NWDA deals with in terms of assisting are some of the most vulnerable clients, are persons in terms of being either away from the job market for a long time or have multiple issues why they're not able to get into the job market. So those are some of the people that would be the extended registrants getting services per se.
So Mr. McLean, your question was what was the success rate? It's a 16% success rate.
Yeah, because we're talking 314. 15 wasn't filled for the month of April. Am I right? Out of the 314, that tells me that's 290.
15 still in recruitment.
That tells me 299 jobs were filled.
No, they said 48 jobs were filled.
They only filled 48 out of 299.
But again, bear in mind.
One second, Mr. Rivers. You asked what was the success rate of the NWDA.
Yes.
So the success rate is the 48 jobs that they filled out of the 300 adverts. So you have a 16% success rate.
16%, yes. Now I need to know what is causing it not to be higher. Is it because of the people who are registered does not fit those jobs, or is it that this system is totally absolutely being manipulated by those employers and not being fair, being honest with the immigration department where they can be charged $20,000.
Mr. Chair, through you, first of all, I don't think that we can state with any degree of certainty or confidence that all of the unemployed persons in the country, all unemployed Caymanians, are registered, first of all. So the registration process, the services, the accessing those jobs are only those who are registered. As I said, a number and the vast majority.
How many people were registered in April? On your register in April?
Mr. Chair, I'd have to get that because I have the information up to the end of May 31st, so there may be a bit of a mismatch there. While that information is being gathered, the point, again, that I think is very important to reiterate is that the people that the NWDA works with as a large number of persons who are registered as the job seeker extended registrants, they are the ones that are furthest away, and so therefore they're the ones that need the most support, including training and whatnot. So you would expect that there may be a bit of a delay in the success of them accessing employment. That's why there's such a heavy focus on dealing with training and development and addressing skills deficits. Now, as it relates to decisions relating to work permit decisions, obviously that is the remit of the immigration department, the immigration boards, but the information that we provide is to try to make them make better informed decisions in that regard as to who is applied, what their qualifications are, what the recommendations, if any, from the NWDA are, and what the employers themselves say about those persons applying through that system.
Mr. Chairman, I understand all that. Where I'm going is, what is causing this? That we can post 314 jobs in 1 month, and we only have 16% success. With Caymanians, over 200 jobs, new jobs, are filled by work permits. Whether it's renewal or we need to find out the cause of why Caymanians are not getting on the job. When I'm sure the data, that the register will show that we have much more Caymanians on it, which whether they registered themselves on it, looking jobs or otherwise, but more important of what the NWDA is handling. We need to find out. We can't sit down and say, here are the statistics, and next month it's gone up by 1% when these jobs are available.
Mr. Chair, through you, yes, and that's a question that we are looking to try to address from a holistic perspective, and that's why we have just recently, we have not had the opportunity to actually look at the report that was just given this week from the Interministerial Committee on Employment, which I've spoken to in this House before, that the government has called, because there are a number of reasons why this may be the case, and we need to look at it from that regard. I agree with the member, this is a problem. So I certainly don't think that and I don't want anybody in this House to get the impression that we need to have a better understanding as to what some of these issues are. But we also need to appreciate that there may be a skills mismatch between the persons who are registered and the jobs that are registered. So that itself may account for why persons that are registered in the system may not be the ones that have been hired. But we have a system where we at least can be able to see what attempts are being made by employers at this stage to recruit Caymanians to this degree. So we certainly are moving in the right direction, and we need to continue to be vigilant and ask these questions. And I can give you, Mr. Chair, as you would know, this is certainly an area that I will continue to ensure that we move forward. And as a result of it now becoming an e-government initiative, trying to bring a better working relationship between Immigration Department, Immigration Board processes, and that of the NWDA, so we can really get to the crux of why suitably qualified Caymanians aren't being hired. And when we know that we have Caymanians that may not necessarily have the skill set that they need to access the employment that they want, how do we best address it?
The Chairman, I support the minister in her position. There is one thing missing in all of this. And I go right back to what I said earlier. Someone needs to be in the interview room. Immigration not there, and they just hand them out. NWDA is not there. Now we see the reason for the amalgamation of labor. One roof, one management. It needs to come from immigration. Immigration got enough work trying to stop undesirables from coming in and allowing those that are permitted to come. That's their job. The time has come to move it from under them. NWDA are taking the word of the employer. The person is not suitable. They're passing that on to immigration through that portal. Immigration is handing them out like we were handing them out in 2002, 3, and 4.
Mr. Chair, through you, just a clarification, the information from the employers come from the employers directly. They actually state their views. It isn't that it's being filtered
Mr.
through the
Chairman,
NWDA.
I'm sorry, but I just said that. The employer sends it to NWDA. NWDA sends it on to immigration through the portal. There are no checks and balances. None. That's one of the major problems we need to address. And that skill set, the mismatch of skill sets, that's what we need to take up education with, on retooling people. If we notice statistically it is in the tourism market or in the construction market or in the jewelry, the wholesale market, whatever, and that's where our focus needs to be. If we see a trend of these 300, the majority of them is in that area and we're not getting it filled, that's where we're not getting it filled, that's where we need to concentrate our training on.
And Mr. Chair, through you, I mean, I think there's one other piece of information that I don't want the member to miss in all of this in terms of checks and balance. As I said, this is a work in progress. We weren't able to have this conversation 2 years ago, but now that we are, the job seekers themselves can comment on the employer's comment, so to speak, as it relates to the outcome of that particular interview process. So that in itself, again, can be fed into the system. So now the Immigration Department, who is the decision-making body when it comes to giving or not giving work permits, they can see the NWDA referrals if the person is referred by the NWDA. They can see the employer comment, and they can see the employee's comment as it relates to the employer's comment. It's about making sure that the information is there and it's transparent, and that they're no longer relying solely on the word of the employer when it comes to justifying why they need this permit or not.
Who updates that to put the prospective employees' comments up there?
The, Mr. Chair, the persons who are registered in the system, if they have gone through the process of applying for a job through the portal, they get notifications. So they will get a notification when a comment has been posted as it relates to their particular file. So they then have the option to go on and make whatever statement or not as it relates to what is on their file. So as a registrant, you have access to your file and you see what is posted there.
And Mr. Chairman, you know I have asked this. What percentage of those respond?
Mr. Chair, that's something that we would have to try to give an undertaking to get to the member, but I don't have that data to hand.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We're right back to it. We need a little more hands-on, right inside. In the interview or in those comments, because there are many people who are registered with NWDA that do not have computers, and they did not register themselves. It was the NWDA did it. NWDA cannot put comments on there if they don't know what the employer is, prospective employee is saying.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, we will have to defer the vote on this appropriation so that we can make progress.
You know, I ain't got no more. If they're long-winded out there, it's fine. They want to answer that, it's fine. The only other question I have is on EGA 3, which is labor law.
Let's move on to EGA 3. What's the question?
One question.
EGA 3, for the record, EGA 3, employment regulatory activities for $1,030,616. What's the question, Mr. Miller, Mr. McLean?
Mr. Chairman, I merely wanted to ask the status of the labor law and when it's anticipated that it will reach these hallowed halls.
Mr. Chair, through you, the draft for public consultation will be made available to the public by the end of this month.
Draft for the public consultation, you said? Mr. Chairman, I wonder if I can ask the minister if we could get a little copy and one of the other ones that they did the other day, is it? The education bill. I mean,
Certainly, Mr. Chair, the education bill we can make available, it's on the website, but if you want a hard copy, we can make available to members as well. And we certainly give that undertaking. If the member wants a hard copy, we can make that available to him. The draft bill or the bill for public consultation will be made available once it is out for public consultation as well.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the minister. I just said some people don't have computers. There's another category. Those who don't, whose knowledge of computers you can write on the back of a 5-cent stamp and still have place to lick your tongue. I'm in that category.
Fair enough. So we will make sure that you get hard copies. But to your point about access to computers and for NWDA registrants, all of the public libraries are accessible to the NWDA, and that's why we have the outreach to assist people in the communities in that regard. Plus, there is a public kiosk at the NWDA, which is available for persons to walk in off the street, no appointment necessary, to access the online registration if necessary. So we try to make it as accessible as possible for those that may not have computers in their home. All the public libraries, including the Sister Islands, as well as the public kiosks in the Central Georgetown office.
Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the minister. The minister said these two bills, the labor law and education law, are going out for public consultation. Could you give us an outline of how you're going to accomplish that public consultation, or is it just being made available on the internet and you check it if you want?
Mr. Chair, through you, as you know, the education bill public consultation is ongoing as we speak, and there's been a number of activities that have already taken place and that are planned for the remainder of the month. And I would ask I'd ask the acting chief officer to talk more detail about what those activities entail, and then with respect to the labor law, I will then ask the acting deputy chief to talk about the plan of action for that particular bill once that is put out for public consultation. In the meantime, I can speak to the fact that there is a survey survey for anybody that wants to actually participate in that survey for the education bill, which is currently online now on the Ministry of Education website, and that's open to the general public, but there will be targeted activities planned as well, and I'll ask the acting chief now to give us an account of that.
Mr. Chairman, in terms of public consultation on the education bill, we are doing set meetings with schools, all teachers, all staff, PTAs, the Teachers Forum, Education Council, our principals meeting, and our student forum.
Thank you, Mr. Suku. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I see that they plan to deal with all those people who would normally have a direct interest and a vested interest in the bill. What about the general public at large? No public meetings, no town hall style meetings to discuss the bill, to explain to the public what the bill does, because we got to get beyond relying on this technology and only stakeholders take an interest. The general public has a right to know, particularly on such important legislation as education and labor, which is going to affect all and sundry. And I would invite the minister and her team to come to my constituency and have a public meeting to which the general constituency would be allowed to come and make a presentation which explains what the bill does, why it does it, what is accepted to explain, and take questions and answer and comments from the general public.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, through you, we would not want to disenfranchise anyone in this way that would want to basically have their say on that regard. So we will look to see how we can accommodate the public meetings as it relates to the education bill. I know there are public meetings planned as it relates to the labor law, and I'll ask the acting deputy chief officer to speak to that in more detail. But also just to let you know, it's going to be a raft of 3 very important bills coming from this ministry. We've been working hard. There is the pensions bill as well, which is going to be put out for public consultation. And so the acting deputy chief can speak to both of those public consultation processes, but we will look to see how we can accommodate the education bill process.
Mr. Chair, Tammy E. Banks, Acting Deputy Chief Officer. In response to the honorable member's question, the Cabinet has recently approved a 60-day public consultation period, and it will begin the end of this month. The consultation will involve the pensions amendment bill as well as the labor relations bill, and it will involve meeting with key stakeholders, surveys. The bills will be available online, as well as presentations done at district meetings and an opportunity for the public to provide comments via email and post.
Mr. Chairman, I would encourage other members to make sure that they come to their boroughs and constituents and make this presentation, because what has been outlined to me, we are not going to have, it will not even be 10% of the population that affected will have access in the current plans. Because the only ones who are going to go online and do it are those who have a vested interest. And we need to make a more effort to, I would assume that the government thinks that all 3 of these bills are now good bills and that they're the right thing for the country. So the government should be willing to come out to all of these civic centers and church halls and have meetings with people and invite them to sell them and convince the public that it is a good bill.
Mr. Chair, through you, yes, I agree, and that is certainly what has been envisaged
But not in this group.
from the labor law and the pension bill, or the labor bill and the pension bill. The advice that was received at the time, but certainly something that I'm willing to revisit and actually give a commitment that we will move forward with, was as it relates to the education law, because the base of the law was very similar to what was widely discussed very recently in that of the education modernization law. The advice that came through at that time was it wasn't necessarily something that may have been necessary. However, I am listening to the voice of the representative of the District of Northside and any other representatives who may have the similar view, and we will look to ensure that we have district-level public consultation planned for the education bill as well. It was always envisaged for the labor law, or the labor bill and the pension bill. We will now build it in as it relates to the education bill.
Mr. Chairman, my community can have the public meetings, you know. We do that every month, right? I'm worried about the other communities who drive to my district to hear about what the bill's going to say. And I don't think I can overemphasize the importance that the public that needs. We need to be having meetings about these bills in Windsor Park and Swamp and West Bay, all over the island. And this cannot be done in 60 days. Because the government has taken, 4 years, 5 years that I'm aware of to redraft the pension bill and the labor bill, and you're going to give the public 60 days to go online and read it and put their own interpretation to it. I think we need to be much more aggressive and we need to be much more informative to the public and the people that we represent.
Mr. Chair, through you, certainly we will do all we can to try to get the message out in a way, as the member has indicated, to make sure the public is aware of the message. We have been, at least as it relates to the immigration bill thus far, we have been on radio. We will continue to hit a number of those mediums that reaches the wider public, but now we will ensure that the district level meetings will take place as well. Of course, you know, public consultation could, especially with these particular legislations, we could pretty much go on for another 4 years talking about what we need to do. But the fact is we need to get to a point where we actually bring the bills to the House to be voted on in order for it to be passed, to be implemented, and to be carried forward. So that's why there had to be some sort of number associated or a period of time associated for public consultation. It can be a work in progress depending on the type of feedback that we get and the needs as a result of making whatever changes that may come forward as a result of the public consultation. But we had to give an initial time frame so that the staff and the ministry and the departments know there is a particular time frame that we're working towards.
I agree.
But
I just think 60 days is too short.
We want to bring it to the House in time for it to actually be debated and passed, and hopefully move beyond just talking about it for the last 4 years, as you've indicated.
Thank you.
To you, Mr. Chairman, I noticed that particularly these three pieces of legislation, the labor and the pensions, and to a lesser extent the education, there have been wholesale changes of staff at the top. Is there any succession plan, or are the people who would have been the architects of these legislations while they held the posts going to be involved in any of this public consultation?
Mr. Chair, I will ask the Acting Chief Officer to speak to the issue as it relates to the staffing.
Mr. Chairman, in relation to the education bill, there are no changes in staff that would impact public consultation on the education bill. In relation to the labor and pensions bill, particularly the pensions bill, what we did in order to achieve this work is we split responsibility for project lead on drafting these bills between Mr. Ebanks as the head of the Department of Labor and Pensions and Ms. Wollaston, the Superintendent of Pensions, who was seconded to the ministry for express purpose of providing the project of getting the pensions bill done. So therefore, to speak frankly, Ms. Wollaston is able to lead in terms of public consultation on the pensions bill, Where we may have an issue is on the labor bill, because what has been made public is Mr. Ebanks's intention to resign post and move on to greener pastures. However, we do have a contingency plan, and we will be holding discussions on how to ensure that the public consultation is of quality. And I won't go into details right now, Mr. Chairman, but rest assured we will have a quality public consultation on the bill, and full details will be explained to the public about the details of the bill, what the bill is intended to do, and how it will impact them.
Thank you, Mr. Suku. Mr. Miller?
And through you, Mr. Chairman, what success, I noticed in the paper that Mr. Mario is leaving in the month. What is the succession plan to replace him by the 1st of July? That's another acting situation again, or?
Mr. Chairman, with great respect, I won't go into any details on that post at this present time, but as soon as I can, I will make public what my intention will be towards the post.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, I don't want to challenge Mr. Suku, but I simply ask the question, do you have a succession plan to put somebody in the post on the 1st of July, and you're telling me you're not prepared to tell me? There's a bar there, you know.
Mr. Chairman, we have a deputy for pensions in the person of Ms. Williston, who's seconded to the ministry. We have a deputy for labor, and I intend to advertise the post. In looking at logistics for trying to sort out how we're going to proceed in the short term, I have a choice between immediately advertising the post, or I have a choice between appointing someone to act for a period of time. What I'm saying right now is that that final decision has not been made because it is contingent upon things that I'm not prepared to discuss here. Once those discussions are held, once those decisions are made, I will make a public statement as to what will happen with the department moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Suku. Mr. Miller, you have a follow-up question? Mr. Suku?
What? Only, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McLean, sorry.
Okay, sorry. Mr. Chairman, I only wanted to, on one was the private school support, the 1.5. I believe you said you could just take as many questions and then you can vote on it.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, before we finish, so we're through asking questions on
Yeah.
EGA 3?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
2 and 3, 3 and 4. Well, what it is that you got there, sir?
right. So then, are there any questions on EGA 10? Evaluation and support services.
That was the one I wanted to know about the smart boards, since it's the technology stuff.
Okay. You want to ask that question quickly?
Yeah, just if all of the boards have been installed at East End, or when, and you might as well answer north side. And if not, when will they be done? And button down too, I guess.
Mr. Chair, through you, I will ask the manager for ICT to speak specifically to the project that's being requested.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, through you, it's Stephen Dirksen, ICT Manager for the Ministry of Education, Employment, and Gender Affairs. I can report that at East End Primary School, the 3 interactive whiteboards in years 3, 4, and reception were mounted and installed last summer. 3 new interactive whiteboards were installed on May 28th. So all East End Primary School classrooms have an interactive whiteboard installed at this time. In terms of Edna and Moyle Primary School, 3 interactive whiteboards were installed in years 1, 2, and 6 last summer. 2 new interactive whiteboards were installed in May of 2015, and 1 more interactive whiteboard is on island and will be installed in reception in summer. In terms of the other schools, interactive whiteboards have been installed at Boddentown and Georgetown and Savannah, and the remaining boards will be installed during the summer months.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm satisfied.
Thank
As long
you.
as he said that all up there, I haven't been to school since before May. But I'll be there Tuesday morning, and oh God, I'm going to inspect.
Okay, thank you. So that's it for EGA 10. Mr. McLean, what was the other one you had a question?
Mr. Chairman, where is it? Help me, Mr. Chairman, please. Oh, NGS 34.
NGS.
All I wanted was
Primary,
to,
NGS 34, primary and secondary education by private schools for $1,530,000.
yes, sir. I just wanted to clarify today and to impress upon the minister that what I was trying to arrive at is that, which I don't think I explained very well, is that we are supporting the private schools. I don't have a problem with it. But when the immigration department makes a policy mandating that expat children have to go to private school, it deprives Caymanians from going to private schools because the schools anticipate and block out a certain amount each year to accommodate that policy from immigration. And the parents of the expat children, the expat parents, they go ahead and register their children far in advance, like when they're born or when they're 1 year old, to get into school in 3 years' time or 4 years' time. And what it's doing is it's blocking off Caymanian children from going to private school. And what we're going to have is a segregated society. When I went to school, everybody went up by high school. We had people from Timbuktu, Germany, whatever. And we had a more integrated society. And now what we're getting is that private schools only taking the people who are at the very top, the socio-economic top in this country. But there are many Caymanians down at the bottom, midway, who will make those sacrifices, but we're depriving them because of an immigration policy that they devise by immigration department.
Mr. Chair, through you, I think I understand now what the concern that the member has raised, and I will certainly speak with the caucus as a whole, but the minister responsible for Home Affairs in particular, about how we can address the concern as it relates to education policy in this regard.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I thank the minister. It must be the education department to say we don't have any space left for that particular year or whatever. It must be the ministry, whether it's expat or whatever, like she explained this morning, the minister explained this morning. It must be the ministry that do that, and then they can go to private school.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Are there any further questions? Sorry, no, I think there are no questions. Let's go to CDB 1. Disbursement Government Scholarships Funding, $42,951. Are there any questions? Okay. If there are no questions, we will go to NGS 25, Teaching of Tertiary Education Courses, $90,000. NGS 27, Supervision of Preschool Children, $54,000. NGS 76, Autism Diagnostics and Sexual Trauma Recovery Program, $28,825. NGS 79, K9 Security Services, $31,500.
Mr. Chairman, I know it's not here, but I believe this is a good spot. Did I get an answer as to when the security is going to be placed at East End, or if there's a necessity for it?
Mr. Chairman, we're going back out to advertise a tender at the end of June. Both East End and Northside Primary are included.
Thank you. Thank you. Transfer payments, TP. We don't have a quorum yet. So let's press on. TP 27. NGS, which one? Okay. TP 27. Preschool educational assistance, $713,800. That would be on page 275. All right, let us proceed to vote on as many as we can at this stage. Oh, we haven't got a quorum as yet. TP 30, are there any questions on TP 30? Local and overseas scholarships and bursaries, $10,762,690.
Mr. Chairman, is any of this intended to fund any of the 14 Caymanian doctors that need to go off to specialize?
Before we answer that question, let's take the vote on those that we've settled already. Let's take the vote on those we've settled.
All right.
And I'll do them in bulk, except for 34 that Mr. Miller wants to vote against.
Yes, sir.
EGA 2, job placement and employer support activities, $1,533,281. EGA 3, employment regulatory activities, $1,030,616. EGA 10, education evaluation and support services, $4,852,485. CDB 1, disbursement government scholarship funding, $42,951. NGS 25, teaching of tertiary education courses, $90,000. NGS 27, supervision of preschool children, $54,000. NGS 76, autism diagnostics and sexual trauma recovery program, $28,825. NGS 79, K9 security services, $31,500. All those in favor of the above, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We will take a division of the vote with respect to NGS 34. All those in favor of NGS 34, primary and secondary education by private schools for $1,530,000, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Oh, no.
Yeah. TP 27, we've completed that. TP 30, local and overseas scholarships and bursaries, $10,762,690. Are there any questions?
Then I was asking, Mr. Chairman, through you, is any of this fund earmarked to fund the some, if not all, of the 14 Cayman doctors who need to go off and get board certified in various specialties, because there is a dire need for that in the medical community.
Mr. Chair, through you, the doctors looking to specialize would be able to apply to the Education Council for funding, and the criteria would apply in that regard as it relates to their ability to access funding with respect to their specializations.
The problem I have with that is I think 3 have already applied and been turned down because they don't think they will have the funding. And funding seems to have been an issue for several years. So I'm wondering if the minister would consider, out of 10,762,690, if we would take 300,000 and ring fence it for Caymanian doctors to go to be board specialized, and let them compete for it. But I want some specific funding for that, because there's a serious need in the country. We're going to be in a serious problem in a couple of years if we don't get some Caymanians board certified in medical specialties. And this is government funds, and we need to know what's good for the country. And I don't want all of it going to psychology degrees or cooking.
Mr. Chair, through you, as I said, this obviously, this is a topic that the government is currently discussing to see how we can best address the needs of the student population, or the doctors looking to specialize population. And so with respect to scholarships, as I said, the scholarship criteria would apply as it would for any other person looking to access funding. And so in that regard, they can apply. There is also the opportunity through CIDB for student loans. I think that's something that is an option as well.
CIDB don't have money.
But that is certainly something that we will look at in terms of seeing how we can. But to say at this point that we can earmark this amount, I'm not in a position to say exactly how much that would be. But we certainly have, as a result of Education Policy Council taking a decision about how the funding should be spent, they have agreed that the persons that meet the criteria would be able to access scholarships as would any other person in that regard. Whether or not the scholarships would cover the entire amount needed is to be determined. But again, it is within the scholarship regime that currently exists. They would be able to apply.
Mr. Chairman, one of the problems that we are now experiencing in this country with this scholarship and this fixed amount, or what it is now, $20,000 or $25,000 for all and sundry. The government used to take the position on scholarships, certainly when I got a scholarship, that they first funded what the government needed in terms of education and specialists or whatever. We've gotten away from that, apparently, and there is open competition, and oftentimes the government's money is not being spent to fulfill to train government's manpower needs. And I believe we need to be more specific and try harder to fill government manpower needs. And I would argue that within the medical profession, within all the professions, financial, tourism, anywhere else, there is no greater need at this moment than to get these Caymanian doctors board certified. And what I'm asking the minister to do is to consider ring fencing a certain amount of this, and you bond them according to what it costs to train them. Some of them, if it costs $200,000 for them to get their board certification, bond them for 5-6 years. So they have to come back and work in the government healthcare for that. They would like that because at least they guarantee a job.
Mr. Chair, through you, certainly we can, as minister, I will take the matter forward with respect to ring fencing, as the member has asked. As it relates to accessing funds for government priorities, you're absolutely right. Somehow we moved away from that system, and now we're actually trying to move back to a system where we match the manpower needs with the scholarships that we give. And the Education Council has recently just undergone a review of the scholarship criteria to do just that, looking at certain priority occupations, as it would say, as it would relate to the needs of the country. So certainly that is something that we are considering, and so I would agree to look at that and give that further consideration at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you. If there are no further questions, then we will proceed to another appropriation. Are there any questions on TP 51, other educational assistance for $249,154? TP 52, are there any questions? TP 52, Young Nation Builder Scholarships, $600,000. Mr. McLean?
Mr. Chairman, the reduction here is, I guess, because of some of those scholarships, the training has been completed.
Mr. Chair, through you, yes, the reduction is due to the fact that the students are completing their studies, and so there's no need to top up that particular vote.
Thank you. TP 56, Employment Initiatives, $641,000. Any questions?
Is that used for, Mr. Chairman? Can we have a little information on this employment initiatives?
It's on page 276.
Mr. Chair, through you, the initiatives that would be funded out of that vote would be the pastoral support workers, which are the workers that are assigned to a number of schools. The Passport to Success program, which we work with in providing employment-related training and other support to persons who go through the Passport to Success program, as well as this funding for the apprenticeship program, which is run by the Superior Auto Training Program.
Thank you, Minister Rivers. Mr. Miller, that was satisfactory? Okay, perfect. TP 61, Student Enrichment and Support Services, $554,850, page 277.
Question. Is this allocated on that equity basis too? Or how is it allocated to the various schools?
If everyone could just hang in there. I know it's Friday evening, approaching 7 p.m., but we are 5 minutes away from finishing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I echo those sentiments. Please, if you could all wait patiently to get this process done, I'd appreciate it. That particular vote relates to the after-school program, and that is the funding that goes towards supporting the after-school program, which is run throughout the country.
Mr. Miller, that's satisfactory? Okay. Other executive expense, OE11, subscription to Caribbean Examination Council, $13,455. OE12, University of the West Indies membership levy, $161,000. Mr. McLean?
Mr. Chairman, does this mean that we're reducing the spots at UE? Because I thought that the subscription, the amount of subscription gave you a certain amount of spots that you could take each year, that you could utilize each year.
Mr. Chair, through you, the ministry, I've been told, has not been given any indication that that would equate to a reduction in the number of spots or any of our ability to access the University of the West Indies in that way. They recognize it's a receivable, and so we are still able, as far as I understand, to be able to send the students at the rates that they would give for contributing countries.
How many spots do we have at University of West Indies right now? Because you are guaranteed certain spots.
2 for medicine.
Mr. Chair, through you, as far as it's been explained to me, we don't necessarily have a number of spots. What we do have is, as a contributing country, we have reduced rates that we would be able to access. So there isn't any limit per se as to the number of people we could send. We would just be able to send them at the reduced rate that they give for contributing countries. That's the information that's come to me.
Minister, if I remember correctly, there was an arrears, and the rate of payment on the arrears was reduced. Is that why we see the reduction? If I remember correctly? Yeah, I thought that's what it was. There was an arrears in the annual levy, and it had gotten to several 100,000, as you see there. But they had reduced the rate at which they were paying it off. Because from what was explained to us by someone a few years ago when we first took office, Cayman is one of the few countries that makes its payments on a regular basis, but we were not sending any students for some time, but we had like 1 or 2. So we made the prudent decision to slow down on the rate of payment of the arrears. Since we didn't have that many children there, we would eventually become current. But I don't think, as as she has said, that it affects the amount of children we can send. It was during the years of the economic recession when they were in in all fairness, it would have been because of the austerity measures. You had to decide what was absolutely necessary and what could be deferred. So they deferred the payment to the overseas institution in order to make the expenditures locally. So that's to the best of my knowledge and memory.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and just for one clarification, it was just stated that the only program that there isn't the reduced rates is the MBBS medical program in Trinidad, at the Trinidad campus, and apparently that has been reserved for persons from Trinidad by the Trinidad government.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have always thought that
Mr. McLean,
Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to look through the 2011-12, but University of the West Indies membership levy, QE12, 372,312, and in 2010, that's 2011-12, and then 2010-11 was the same amount.
what's the annual levy?
And in this case, something is confusing here because
Whatever the payments are, they had fallen behind. There was an arrears, and they were making the payments, but have since reduced the rate at which they're paying them off, because we are one of the countries who are always current, but yet we had probably the least number of students. So financially, it made no sense to rush to pay it up when you weren't utilizing the benefit and you had other pressing needs locally. So that's the crux of it. Whatever the numbers are, that's the crux of it.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that certainly was the intention, at least now going forward, and how we're approaching the payments.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to equity investments, EI 12, Ministry of Education, Employment and Gender Affairs, $5 million. Are there any questions?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, we've been taking some improvements to the Edna Mile Primary School for 3-4 years now to increase the number of classrooms. I have had several meetings with the teachers and the facility managers and public works, and I think we finally come down to a plan. Can the minister tell me whether the plan has been submitted to planning and has it been approved by planning? Sorry, buddy.
Mr. Chair, through you, I will ask the project manager in the ministry to answer those questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Before you answer that, if it gives anyone a hope, this is the last one. Continue.
Mr. Chair, we did actually go through a consultation period with the principal, the PTA of Edna Moyle Primary School. Drawings were prepared, estimates have been received, drawings are approved by planning department. It's currently in with Building Control Unit for final approval.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, can the minister say, or the facility manager say, the estimates were for construction?
Mr. Chairman, the estimates are for preliminary estimates for construction and completion of the facility.
Can the facility manager say what those numbers were? Oh, no, I want him to ring fence now.
Mr. Miller, because it's a tender process, it wouldn't be prudent to reveal estimated cost of construction. Otherwise, we wouldn't necessarily get the best price when we do go out to tender. Yeah, so if you don't mind, Mr. Miller, I wouldn't want them to reveal that information at this stage.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would insist that it be revealed if the government will agree to ring fence out of this $5 million, the funds to build the 2 classrooms and the staff room for the 8 Mile Primary School. And in so doing, could it be possible to start construction early July so it can be completed in time for the September school year? Because this is a serious need for the Northside School. The Northside School has had no capital investment for 25 years. And small amounts maybe, but no additional classrooms. And right now, it's the only primary school in the island that doesn't have a staff room. We're using half of the hall, which doubles as a dining room, as a classroom. We have the only temporary classroom, I believe, still existing on the island.
Mr. Chair, through you, just again, I mean, to make sure that there isn't a misunderstanding about the capital projects or capital works that have gone on at the Edna Moyle Primary School. I've been informed that there have been minor capital projects done within the last 25 years, not to the extent that the member is asking for, but there has been the work on the bus shelter as well as the renovation of the toilets or the restrooms. However, Mr. Chair, this is
Mr. Chairman, forget
this is over the last year. Of course, there's been stuff that have happened prior to that, but to the question of being able to ring fence for that particular project, Mr. Chair, I would more than happy to give a commitment once I get a commitment from the government with respect to resources to be able to address these capital needs. I'm certainly not in a position to say that we can fund that at this stage because we were simply not given the capital with respect to dealing with that particular project, Mr. Speaker, and that's where we're at.
Mr. Chairman, could I have a breakdown of the $5 million? And I want to know why this particular project was not submitted to caucus, to cabinet to be funded, and I want to know why caucus and cabinet turned it down and what else they put in place in which district. So let's have a breakdown of the capital projects for the $5 million. Every other primary school has had classrooms added. Some have had 2-story buildings added.
Minister Rivers, with the capital projects, how many of those would be eligible for public tender as opposed to being done by PWD?
I don't need to know the figure for each one. I will trust them that it adds up to $5 million. But I just want to know where the capital projects are and
Okay.
which districts they are.
Okay.
So the public will know. Because this campaigning has stopped here today.
Okay, so he just wants the name of the project and the school.
Mi- Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, the bulk of the capital that has been allocated to the Ministry of Education with respect to all capital works has been allocated towards addressing the very critical need of John Gray High School. Not to say that there aren't other critical needs, but I think every person in this chamber would agree that John Gray High School is certainly of the criticalness. John Gray High School is certainly one of those schools, and so the lion's share of the capital is allocated, and that equates to over $4 million is being allocated to moving the John Gray High School project forward.
Minister Rose, please, you know what? Let's suspend this right here and now because we can't be revealing the financial information for something that is about to be tendered. Mr. Miller, with all due respect, I think we're going into the fiscal year. We will see if and what is available to provide perhaps something at the Northside Primary School. But this line of questioning just created what we didn't want to create. So in the interest of the country's money, making sure that we get value for money, I do not want us to create another situation where we could potentially reveal what we don't want people to charge us more than the project is worth because they know how much money we have available to it. And that wouldn't be in anyone's own best interest. In fact, it may even detract from what would be available for other districts. So at this stage, we will we will adjourn for the evening. And I think on Wednesday, when we reconvene, it will not be necessary for your staff to return because at that stage, we would just be taking the vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I also, at this stage, would like to thank the staff, and that's for all of them, and for coming down and helping to support this process.
Thank you. We will now adjourn for the evening and reconvene at 9:30 a.m. on Wednesday morning. The date escapes me right now, but it's next week, Wednesday morning. Have a wonderful weekend.